Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Kala, the de Havilland. Twin Otter charter plane shuddered through gray clouds as its mouthy pilot wrestled with the controls, navigating toward the barely visible landing strip ahead. Like the plane's humming engines, the bearded Inuit's mouth hadn't stopped buzzing since we'd taken off from Iqaluit 3 hours before, and my tolerance for both noises had grown slim. Happily, the end of this ordeal was in sight. The small hamlet Mitimatalik, known as Pond Inlet, which we were rocking and tilting down towards. From this vantage point, and in this dawn-greeting, sleet-spitting weather, the village at the northernmost tip of Baffin Island appeared little more than a shadowy cluster of shacks dwarfed by glaciers in the distance. It looked every bit the town at the end of the world it was, and exactly the kind of place you'd find someone like her. I'm just saying, the pilot continued, having received approval to land. I get it, the dating world's tough, but coming all the way to Mitimatalik for a woman? All she wants is a ticket out of this dump. No amount of hot flesh on a cold night is worth being taken for a ride. I forced another smile, though my lips were resistant, watching the landing strip lights glow brighter. Like I said, she's got a wonderful personality, I said, for the 15th time. You don't have to worry. Not everyone's a scammer, spoken like a love-struck fool with more money than sense. The pilot laughed. Well, I hope it goes okay. At least you've got your return flight booked. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. But if you're not here, with or without your girl, I'll be gone. No refunds. I nodded, staring out at the endless expanse of snow that had become visible as dawn broke. Calling it dawn at 10 to noon seemed wrong, but that's what it was this time of year, during Nunavut's polar night, when the sun barely rose above the horizon and daylight, more twilight, didn't last long. A 1 to 2 hour period of faint light that quickly retreated to darkness. It suited me fine, because it suited Kala, December 5th. The body of 35-year-old Naki Pakta is discovered in Rankin Inlet, Kivalik, having bled out from multiple stab wounds. The nature of the injuries is baffling. The star-shaped structure of the wounds suggests they were inflicted from within. No murder weapon is found. No persons of interest are identified. Naki is found in a remote area outside the town, half buried in a mat of Arctic heather. Kala wasn't my online girlfriend, or the catfish the pilot suspected. That was a convenient lie. This time tomorrow, he'd either laugh at me or pat me on the back, depending on how things went. Both eventualities were covered. The plane convulsed as we landed, tires skidding briefly before finding their grip. Then we came to a halt at the terminal, a corrugated outhouse set against a dull, hazy backdrop. "Here we are," he said, grinning through his beard. "Good luck with your woman. You'll need it." I thanked him and disembarked with backpack and camera. The biting cold stabbed me, but I didn't flinch. I inhaled sharply, the icy air burning my lungs, and made my way deeper into the ghost-like outpost of swirling snowflakes, the most remote place I'd ever come to meet a subject. Beyond the airstrip, the snow-covered streets of Mitimatalik were deserted. Dim street lamps illuminated squat, weather-beaten buildings, wide-eyed structures that seemed to huddle together to keep warm and endure the endless night, which had introduced insomnia, sleep paralysis, and nightmares to their eaves. December 10th. Aputi Kanuk, 38, is discovered in his pickup in Whale Cove. The insides of the cab are painted red. Police are baffled. The Inuit sports hundreds of wounds, pinpricks that seem to have punctured the flesh from within. There is nothing untoward in the vehicle, just some strands of heather in the footwell. I passed residences with lights glowing in windows, stores hibernating like frost-covered monuments, and vehicles remade as ice sculptures. I didn't pass people, even though it was midday and as bright as it was going to be for another 24 hours. Nobody was getting their steps in. But that's not to say no one was out. As the snowfall grew thicker and I approached a junction in the road, laughter reached my ears from my destination, Ukpik Tavern, where, according to Sigil, the woman I was seeking should be. A few more steps, and it materialized. A nondescript bar that doubled as a restaurant, dull light spilling through the window. A wooden sign above the door creaked as I pushed through. Inside, I took a moment to shake off the cold and the snow before making my way to a table. The bar was decorated simply, with wooden tables and chairs, and a fireplace burning thick logs. A handful of locals were seated, meeting friends for lunch during this nighttime reprieve. They eyed me with mild suspicion as I came in. I made a show of checking my camera and placing it on the table like it was sacred. They looked away. Just another rich tourist or hipster blogger come to photograph the northern lights. Boring. A barman with a ducktail beard that somehow looked better than mine sauntered over as I shrugged off my parka. He informed me the bar was closing at 1:30, an hour and a bit from now. He noted my Nikon and the guidebook for a neighboring Bylot Island I'd placed on the table. He didn't ask why I was here. I ordered beer and a bowl of caribou stew, then settled down to warm myself and wait. I didn't have to wait long. She came out of the men's room, carrying a mop and bucket, head high as she went behind the bar. The information I'd received had been correct. Not that I doubted it. Sigil was always correct. And though she looked older than 40 and heavier than 180 pounds, she was recognizable as the person who'd been described. Her face was weather-beaten. Strands of gray threaded her braided hair, and the birthmark on her neck was visible above the folds of her jumper. It was her. December 15th. Panic spreads through the Kivalik region as a third body is found. The frozen corpse of Nuvuk Kayuk, 42, is discovered at the foot of a cliff in Chesterfield. It seems he may be the victim of a fall, until he is thawed out and the stab wounds appear. Multiple star-shaped incisions that confirm murder, but there are no clues to be found, except the cluster of heather in his grasp. I received my glass of amber liquid and bowl of meat and veg, which I ate and drank slowly, watching her interact with the locals. She had an infectious laugh and a warm voice. I gathered she'd worked here a while. She seemed kind, not like one who could hurt another. But appearances are deceptive. I knew that better than most. Time crawled as I finished eating. Every so often she'd look in my direction, flash a smile or nod, and I'd look away. I didn't need to make a connection. Not yet. Shortly after 1:15, the locals started getting up to leave. I drained my glass and pulled on my coat. It had been a successful visit. I'd found who I was looking for and gotten a feel for her form. Despite her slight bulk, there was no question she could handle herself. Behind the smiles and laughs, she could wield violence. I paid my bill and left. Outside, it was already black, the brief daylight hours having retreated. The snowfall had ceased, as if scared back into hiding by the night. Pond Inlet was silent, except for the now muted voices of the locals, who slunk out of the tavern behind me, showing less than zero interest in this photo-hunting fool. Stepping onto the stoop of what appeared to be a post office, I took cover in the shadows and fished out my vape. Blood, orange, and charcoal. My flavor of choice. Enough bite to keep me alert, though, of course, I had Sigil for that. And as if on cue, to remind or reprimand me, a sudden cackle of noise penetrated my ear. making me wince as I cupped it. It was a garbled message, like always, broken syllables that were difficult to understand, but whose meaning was clear. I was on the right track, and things were escalating. Kala was about to strike again. December 21st. The remote community of Arctic Bay, Qikiqtaaluk, is shaken by the discovery of Panaa Pictu, 39, found dead while camping on the outskirts of town. Her body, exsanguinated, sports familiar stab wounds. A charred stem of heather is found in her campfire's ashes. 4 Inuit are dead, killed in mysterious fashion. The killer remains at large. I'd taken the 3rd pull on my vape when the bar door opened and my target stepped out, wrapped in a sealskin coat. I couldn't see her face, but I knew from her gait it was her. She didn't waste time, stomping off towards the far end of town, where the street lamps petered out and darkness reigned. I gave her a minute's head start. The snow would record her path. She wasn't expecting me, so she wouldn't try to give me the slip. I took another drag and waited for the barman to lock up before setting off. I activated my Nikon's night vision function and kept an eye on its view screen as I followed her tracks. The buildings thinned out as I left town until there was nothing left but rocks and snow. Somewhere ahead was a forest, but I couldn't make it out. What I could make out was a flat, oblong structure surrounded by a chain link fence. I didn't know what the building was, but the footprints led to it. So that's where I went. A hole had been cut in the fence, spliced wires bent back. I ducked to slip through the gap, careful not to snag my Canada Goose parka, then slunk through the snow to the building. What I could now guess was some kind of supply station. It was abandoned, at least for the winter, but its door had been forced to admit 1 guest. 2, as I eased it open. 3, if Kaala's trap had already been set. I winced in anticipation of a squeal. It didn't come, and I was able to enter a cluttered office lit by a battery-powered lantern. Empty crates and barrels filled the space. Paperwork lay scattered on the floor. In one corner was a sleeping bag, a rucksack, and a small heater. A seal skin coat lay next to the heater, which had been plugged in and was starting to glow. Clever. This wasn't her home. She was using this place as a lure. A crash and a yell brought my eyes to the door behind a dusty reception, and I started towards it, depositing my camera on the desk. Thought you could sneak up on me, eh? Thought you could take me like the others? A thud, a cry, a slam. I reached the door, which was slightly ajar, and peered through. I knew you'd find me, you bitch. But guess what? I got ready. In my ear, Sigil was humming, spitting instructions in urgent, guttural tones. I winced and ignored. I knew what to do. Like Twinak itukalak. I was ready. So I pulled open the door and stepped through. It was a large storage area, illuminated by more lanterns on aluminium shelving units that had been rearranged haphazardly. The shelves, which were presumably used to store produce in normal times, now displayed nothing but flowers, lots of flowers, potted and in full bloom, which was odd because of the season and because of what Sigil told me to bring. Killed Nuvuk, killed Panna. Now I'll kill you. For real this time. The words accompanied more thumps and cries, and then something else, an unnatural keening. I peered around one of the shelving units and found the source of the noise. Jovial, happy Twinak from the bar, straddling the Inuit Kala, slamming her head against the floor as she tried to sing a song. A window on the opposite wall was up. That's how Kala had entered. Seeing the flowers would have made her feel safe, given her confidence, inspired bravado. Of course, that's how Twinak had made ready. A second glance at the nearest flower confirmed it. All the potted plants in here were plastic. Shut up, witch. There's nothing here you can use. Twinak slammed Kala's head harder. The dark-haired, younger woman's words faltered, but she quickly resumed her bird-like song, an eerie, chirping sound that made me shiver. Twinak's back was to me. Kaala's eyes found me as I shucked off my bag. She was surprised, but didn't react. I could see in her eyes she was broken. I could see in her face she was weak. She'd been trekking for weeks, through darkness, making her way up from Tukik, stopping at townships on the way. This was her last stop, but she was tired, hungry. The net was closing in, and she'd underestimated the last of her prey. I'd come to help. Hey, I said, startling Twinak as I unzipped my bag. Haven't you hurt her enough? Who the fuck? Your turn. I removed a potted plant of Arctic heather, real, not plastic, from my bag and put it on the floor, then kicked it towards the barmaid with my foot. Twinak's eyes went wide. Kala's fluttered shut, but her cracked lips continued to warble. Stop, Twinak spat, falling away from the plant. I watched as its leaves began to tremble in response to the quickening of Kaala's song. In my time and profession, in the circles I traveled, and amongst the fiends I called my crew, I'd seen my share of weird shit. But I'd never seen anything like this. I'd never known an animist, someone who could control earthy matter with their voice. So this was one for the books. Kala's eyes snapped open, and as she started to sing, shout her words, the plant reacted. Its stems lengthened, stretching toward Twinak like snakes. The soft leaves twisted and hardened, curling into deadly thorns. The petals flared, exposing a dark, pulsing core Tuinak tried to flee, but the heather was fast. Thorny stems wrapped around her limbs, pulling her down. The more she struggled, the tighter they constricted. Kaala sat up and sang louder, and the heather responded. Vines forced their way into Tuinak's mouth, grew down her throat, muffling her screams as they choked her. I watched as she convulsed, thorns punching out through her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut against probing stems, but that was the least of her worries. I couldn't see what was happening inside her clothes, but the pool of blood seeping out from under her back told the tale. I stood there and watched for several minutes until she stopped moving and Kaala fell silent. Her animist hymn at an end, she collapsed in a heap, fully spent. I went to her, sat behind her, eased her close. She didn't object. She didn't fear me. It was always the way. They could trust me. They knew. I wasn't there to harm them or turn them in. It was the aura of Sigil. They knew I was only there to help, as blood-covered stems of heather slid from Tuinak's mouth. Thorns returned to leaves, and petals drooped. I cradled Kaala in my arms. "It's okay," I said, allowing a slug-like tentacle to exit my ear. "My name is Bertram Belasco. I was alerted to your existence when you took your third victim. I run a network dedicated to supporting people like you. Serial killers, for want of a better term. The Mounties haven't pieced things together, but they'll find you. I can get you out. I have a passport for you in my bag, and flights are booked. I can take you to the States. But you have to agree. Do you agree, Kaala Piak? Will you join my network and kill for me?" Sometimes they thought about it, weighed the pros and cons, took time to make sure I was legit. Kaala didn't. She was in no state, and she didn't care. She simply nodded, eyelids flickering. It's all Sigil needed. It wriggled its tentacle to her throat, slid out a proboscis, and stabbed her. For a moment, Kaala's eyes widened in shock. Then, as quickly as it had struck, the tentacle retracted and slunk back inside my ear, having deposited a small lump of matter under her skin, coating her, making her his, ours, a member of the SK network, in which, as an animist, she'd excel. The world was going to become that bit more deadly, and the craving my master had would be fulfilled. November 28th. The peaceful life of Kaala Piak comes to an end when 5 friends visit her guest house in Tukik. Initially friendly, their true intentions emerge when they reveal they've seen a video online. Footage secretly recorded by a hiker showing Kaala performing animism. Desperate to create a viral video, they pressure her to perform and make them famous. She refuses, and the confrontation turns dark. Threatened with violence, Kaala reveals the Eskimo magic she was born with. using a house plant in self-defense. It starts to strangle Nuvuk. His friends hit her over the head to stop the act. Panicked, thinking her dead, they throw her from a cliff to hide their crime. Kala awakes mid-fall and sings for help. Arctic Heather, at the base of the cliff, answers the call. Her animism, now tainted, has a taste for revenge, and she has the names of 5 who can satisfy it. Witchetty, grub servings. 7. Preparation. Time varies based on resistance of ingredients. Ingredients. 1. Eye of newt. 1 toe of frog. 150 grams wool of bat. 1 tongue of dog. 10 scales of dragon. A pinch of dead man's blood. A drop of a virgin's tear. 1 swollen, pus-filled, witchetty grub for flavor. Preparation. A. Acquire pre-selected ingredients from their natural habitats. Successful extraction requires careful attention to prevent accidental damage. 1. Newt. Net the newt in a crumbling inner-city neighborhood. Still in his teens, the newt is most often found in the company of the local drug-dealing street gang he aspires to be part of. His watchful eyes make him a valuable resource. His fresh-faced appearance keeps him discreet. Optimal time to secure is while he keeps watch for the law and rival gang members outside a dilapidated apartment complex, casting furtive glances into alleys, his attention focused on the addicts and intimidating shadows that wander and lurk there. 2. Frog. Fetch the frog. At the edge of an abandoned industrial rooftop on the outskirts of the city. Her athleticism and powerful 20-something-year-old legs have made her a viral sensation, courtesy of elaborate, self-recorded parkour videos in which she scales buildings, leaps between rooftops, and climbs towering structures. The tattooed, shaven-head frog is at her most vulnerable while occupied with setting up her camera gear to record, having practiced her jumps, tested the winds, and psyched herself up for a stunt. 3. Bat. Bag the bat in the darkness and privacy of her lavish bedroom, whilst she slumbers in the soothing shawl of night. Her golden locks, the envy of all at her Ivy League university, will be glowing around her head like a halo on a Hungarian goose-down pillow, while she dreams of fame and stardom as a singer. Take care to wrap the bat's hair neatly around her head 3 times before removing her from her covers and spiriting her away through the unlatched window of her family's Haven Heights home. 4. Dog. Drag the dog from the smoking hut at the rear of a downtown comedy hall, where he smokes alone after a rough set. An up-and-coming stand-up comedian, his wit and sharp tongue are capable of cutting down hecklers with cruel precision. with thick skin but flimsy material. The dog can be secured when the night sighs with disappointment. His smartest punchlines of the evening, the edgy, heckler-baiting insults, fresh on his lips, unalert, his mind preoccupied with feelings of inadequacy. He will prove easy to batter and snare. 5. Dragon. Extract the dragon from the dressing room of a seedy adult film studio, where she sits before a mirror, her reflection betraying the exhaustion in her eyes. Once a promising young woman, the dragon is trapped in the heartless world she was forced into by debt and destitution, performing for cameras and men. As she waits to be recalled to set, white powder residue under her nose, flawless skin glistening under harsh lights, she can be subdued with a chloroform-soaked rag. 6. Dead man and virgin. The dead man and the virgin can be obtained together from the dead man's car as it idles at the edge of a cliff overlooking the bay. The dead man will be fresh from a strenuous workout, basking in the admiration of the virgin, a pleasant distraction. The infatuated virgin, surprised to have secured a popular male's attention, is keen to impress for validation. His cockiness and her insecurity are the perfect combination of toxicity, making them vital ingredients for the pot. As the virgin is coerced to take things to the next stage, anesthetic gas introduced to the vehicle through its exhaust pipe will render them ripe for the picking. 7. Witchetty grub. Remove from the stockpile in the larder, as previously instructed to prepare. B. Once acquired, transport ingredients to cellar and confine. Take care to label correctly. Wrong identification will result in incorrect ingredients introduced to the pot, spoiling the potency of the broth. C. Inflict sufficient emotional trauma over the course of 24 hours to ensure ingredients are primed. Fear and confusion should be present before proceeding. Screams, pleas for mercy, and despair are key to achieving optimal tenderness. Cooking instructions. Step 1. Eye of newt. Prep. Approach the newt chained in a corner, his fearful blue irised eyes wide, his youthful terror and questioning of the rebellious attitude that led to him falling in with the wrong crowd when he could have stayed home with parents who offered love and tried to teach him right from wrong, will serve as a solid base flavor. Marinate. Let him feel the knife's serrated touch against his cheek, heightening his fear and emptying his bladder. Remain silent as you peer into his soul and exhale fetid breath onto his face. Smirk as you move the tip of the blade to the swollen, tear-infused bag beneath his left eye and start to shimmy it in. Allow the newt to scream as you pierce the eyeball, making your black, crooked teeth the last thing it sees. Harvest. Extract the eye swiftly, ensuring it stays moist. Sever the optic nerve with teeth and drop the excavated eyeball into the cauldron of bubbling broth, allowing its partner to watch from the head it remains housed in. Step 2. Toe of frog. Prep. Open the door to the cage of the naked frog, whose legs twitch as they struggle against their restraints. Her death-defying leaps and infinite recklessness have been reduced to paralysis and nervous kicks. This now caged force of once unstoppable urban adventure will add a tangy zest to the mix. Marinate. Trace a wart-covered finger along the side of a foot, then over each one of her toes, drawing out a series of gasps. Let her realize that no jump can save her as she shirks away. Grab the foot firmly and place the blade against its biggest toe, making it quiver and curl. Watch the frog's face contort and savor her cries as the knife digs deep into the skin. Harvest. Sever the toe at the joint. Allow it to twitch in your fingers as she cries in pain. Eyes locked on the almost insignificant but oh so important digit that aids with her balance. Drop the wriggling toe into the cauldron, letting its spasms add ripples to the broth. Step 3. 150 of wool of bat. Prep. Release the bat from her crate and comb out her lustrous locks, tangled and matted from confinement. The scent of confusion and fear for her life is sickly sweet, but the odor of her wounded pride outweighs it. Even in captivity, the bat's thoughts fixate on her unwashed hair, the long, golden strands that are the source of her appetizing appearance. Marinate. Run fingers through hair, untangling strands with care and soothing the bat with gentle shushes. Admire its luster. Appreciate its silky, smooth feel. Let your withered flesh tingle under its softness. Watch her grimace through tears, trying to coax out some mercy. Then grip a handful of hair and yank back her head. Lift the shears and slide their rusted edges either side of the strands, savoring the scream that slips forth with the snip. Harvest. Shear off 10 handfuls of finest silken hair and place on weighing scales until 150 grams of the bat's identity are harvested. Let her sob uncontrollably as she watches her beauty diminish, mourning the loss of her hair like the frog mourns her toe. Toss the locks into the cauldron and stir, imbuing the soup with a peppery nuance. Step 4. Tongue of dog. Prep. Leave the dog tied to his chair, blindfold in place, but remove the gag from his mouth. His trademark smirk will be absent. replaced with the babbling pleas that come from an understanding that no witty repartee can save him. Allow him to lick his dry lips one last time, moistening them with the mock-yielding lubrication that gives them their tartness. Marinate. Let the dog wield his words like weapons, shouting, cursing, trying to bargain with a devil. Stand quietly as he struggles against his restraints, powerless in the face of unyielding malice. When his adrenaline-fueled vitriol falters, take his chin in a vice-like grip and tug his tongue from his mouth. Slide the shears over the muscle and ease them together. Harvest. Slice through the tongue, severing it cleanly at the base. Watch crimson blood spurt forth, filling the dog's mouth and coating his chin. The ragged stump will quiver as he chokes, his sharp tongue reduced to a useless lump. Toss the fleshy piece into the broth, seasoning it with the sourness of insults. Step 5. 10 scales of dragon. Prep. Remove the hood from the head of the dragon, where she lies strapped to a metal gurney. Dark circles under her eyes mar her otherwise flawless skin and the exotic looks that brought her success. Her fingers tremble from the withdrawal, gnawing at her veins, while the makeup caked on her face fails to conceal the bitterness that came from a life she never wanted. Bitterness that will add complexity to the brew. Marinate. Stand behind the dragon and caress her cheeks, pressing into plump, pillowy skin. Feel her body freeze as your nails scratch the surface. Hear her breathing quicken as she wonders what new hell is about to unfold. No words will leave her lips, even when the razor is brought into view and left to hover over her nose. But the flicker of horror in her eyes will betray her terror. Bring the blade down and slice through her supple cheek like butter. Harvest. Carve 5 1/3 strips of skin from each cheek. As her flesh peels away, suppressed screams will at last fill the cellar, and blood will soften the dried-up makeup on her face. Drop each strip into the cauldron, watching as they sink into the broth, the beauty that defined her, infusing the mixture with a savory depth. Step 6. A pinch of dead man's blood. Prep. Circle the dead man as he dangles from a meat hook, kicking and thrashing. This man, this bully, this self-obsessed, so-called alpha male who has spent his life stepping on others, viewing women as objects and treating people as conquests, will add an acrid taste to the blend, which, when balanced with the richness of the other ingredients, will create something truly sensational. Marinate. Lunge from the front and use shears to cut his shirt from waist to neck, Expose chiseled abs and toned chest, then replace shears with dagger and start to stab. Apply slight pressure at first, tenderizing the flesh with shallow punctures, enough to extract delicate beads of blood. The dead man's bravado will crumble as the jabs become deeper. Wait for the realization that he cannot escape to appear in his eyes. Then draw the dagger back and plunge it with full force into his chest. Harvest. Guide the blade through ribs into the dead man's heart. Watch the fire in his eyes fade as his life-giving treacle spills out. With the dagger protruding from his chest, hold a tarnished teaspoon close to the wound. Wait for his last wheezing breath to rattle out, then catch a drop of syrup in the spoon, drizzling it into the cauldron to add pungency. Step 7. A drop of virgin's tear. Prep. Release the virgin from the cupboard under the stairs. Take her by the arm and drag her from the dark into the cellar. As her eyes adjust to the light, let her witness the gruesome sight of her dead boyfriend hanging from a hook, blood beneath him. Marvel at the way in which she mourns him and howls in torment, her naivety and emotional dependency preventing her from seeing he is no loss, her saved innocence promising a nectarous punch. Marinate, stand back, and let the scene unfold. Listen to the virgin's cries grow louder. Watch her collapse onto the cold, hard floor and crawl away. Witness her growing terror as her eyes go from eyeless newt to toeless frog, from hairless bat to tongueless dog, from red-faced dragon to dangling dead man, again then to you. Approach slowly, sponge in hand, and digia at her tear-soaked cheeks. Harvest. Allow the sponge to be saturated with untainted tears, rich in sorrow. Then leave the virgin to curl up in a ball, covering her ears, squeezing her eyes shut, crying as she tries to deny reality. Carefully squeeze the sponge out over the cauldron, letting her essence and purity drip into the broth, enriching it with subtle, candied sweetness. Step 8. Witchetty grub. Drop the withseti grub into the pot as a final garnish. Stir 6 times. Cover, then leave to ferment. Serving. Decant the concoction into a jar. Screw on a rubber teat, sealing in its rich, aromatic flavor. Suck a single drop into your mouth. Feel your body shudder as the magic flows through it, transforming your hair and your skin, restoring your youth. Indulge a fit of cackling, your voice echoing through the chamber. Then offer a word of gratitude as you depart. Optional flourish. Before leaving, kiss a spell-cast crystal and roll it to the center of the floor. In time, when the ingredients feel brave enough to assist one another, they will turn their traumatized gaze upon it, each seeing in it the future they have been spared. The newt, murdered by his gang after failing as a lookout during a hit. The frog, falling to her death as a result of an overly ambitious jump. The bat, caught in a house fire, her hair igniting to prevent her escape. The dog, stabbed by a heckler after an insult goes too far. The dragon, overdosing to escape the life her looks keep her trapped in. The virgin, dying at the hands of the abusive dead man. Extract from Witchetty Grub, Edition 7. Recipes for preservation. Broths using humane ingredients and ethical processing methods. In the morning light. The earlier days of the apocalypse was only chaos. Death and smoke gripped the air. I could feel it stale all around me. It coated my skin, my clothes, my hair. Fear pulsed through every vein. Terror gripped every muscle. Dread gnawed every brain. It was melted into the eyes of everyone you passed. When would it happen to me? When will I watch it happen to someone I love? What could we have done differently? Thoughts that would plague my mind. Over and over, my new reality. The dead no longer stayed dead, and those bitten became deranged, unreachable. They would rip out their hair, scream into the night, pick the skin off their bones until they would be covered in dark, bloody scabs that never seemed to heal. The worst was when they came for you, their eyes empty pits as they chased after you with never-ending endurance and unnatural speed. Nothing like seeing a crippled old woman hit by a truck going 40 mph, only to rise again unfazed, keeping pace with a teenager as she drags her mangled foot behind her. The only advantage left was the inability to use their brains. They couldn't climb ladders or trees. They couldn't open doors or sneak through windows. And in this world, we had to use every advantage we could get. In those early days, everyone still held on to their humanity. The memories of their old life still fresh. I remember thinking that things may eventually go back to normal. Eventually, where my biggest problem was maybe forgetting my lunch at home or something as juvenile as what to wear to my meeting. However, everything this new world touched was tainted. Cities burned, homes abandoned, our population destroyed, leaving only a handful of us left. Fortunate would not a word I would use for the survivors. What I was fortunate for, however, was the group I had found a few months prior. They were mostly good people in present standards. We didn't rob from the living. We didn't murder the innocent or strike down the weak. We took care of one another and watched each other's back. Everyone pulled their weight from going on supply runs, to working the garden, to gathering firewood. The group consisted of 15 of us who camped deep in a national forest near Colorado Springs. The supply runs were little more than a day's trip, and our traveling group consisted of 3 people always. I would go as often as I could, preferring to stay on the move to keep my shifting thoughts at bay. We always played it safe and quiet, successfully making it 5 months without losing a member. This should have brought me an ounce of comfort, that it has been a while since we lost someone, so it must mean we were getting wiser. Although all I could think to count on was luck, and any day that luck would eventually run out and disaster would strike. We were camped out in some loft apartments bordering the forest. Paul was on watch duty, while Libby slept on the couch adjacent to mine. I remember falling asleep with blankets wrapped around me that reminded me of a moldy scent that used to cling to clothes that were left in the washer longer than they should have been. It used to bother me using strangers' belongings like their clothes or blankets, especially when the entire place still smelled of old cigar smoke. However, I came to be grateful for the comfort of being in a semi-safe, warm spot for the night. I woke with a jerk, jarring myself out of my typical reoccurring nightmare. Sweat forced my dark hair to cling to my forehead. Panting, I mindlessly reached for the weapon beside me. My hands found only a butcher knife I snagged from the kitchen before falling to sleep. Remembering I had given Paul my handgun for his rotation of watch, since it was less bulky than the shotgun he often slugged around. I tried to calm my racing heart, but something had just felt wrong. I looked over, seeing Libby's still sleeping form. I started to stand, wondering how long I had been asleep. Surely Paul was well past his shift. I reached the window, pulling back the blinds to find gray light pouring through the opening. My heart sank. Paul was supposed to wake me hours ago. I didn't see him anywhere in the still, dark living room. I silently walked over to Libby and gave her a gentle shake before stepping back, knowing she slept with a knife under her pillow. She sat up with a gasp, her blonde hair frizzing out from her worn braid. Something is wrong. Paul should have woken me hours ago. She stared at me blankly, my words taking a few seconds longer to comprehend as she shook sleep from her mind. "Where is he?" she asked, blinking vigorously. Her green eyes roamed the shadows of the living room. I had liked Libby from the moment I met her. A few months prior, she had found us on her own, days after losing her partner to a minor infection that would have only required a throughout cleaning and maybe a few antibiotic before the outbreak. I've never asked, but she couldn't be much younger than me, her youth apparent in her round cheeks. Paul, on the other hand, was well older than us bother. He looked closer to my father's age, gray hairs dusting his hair and reaching down into his beard. It was out of character for him to wander off on his own. We survived by following strict rules that I know that he knew, because I had gone on more runs with Paul than anyone else in the group. I'm not sure. Help me look around? She nodded and tossed her blanket to the side, wobbling a bit as she stood. Once we were sure that he was nowhere inside, my cold panic really did begin to take hold. We quickly gathered our limited supplies. I carried Paul's shotgun and bag with mine, thankful that he had always packed light. Outside, the light from the sun began to coat everything in a golden hue. The chilled, damp air hung from everything from the night before. I moved as silently as I could, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of Paul. It was mornings like this that seemed to deceive you and hide the horrors of the world we lived in. I would have loved a day like this, before the outbreak. The birds chirping, the air smelling of fresh pine, the clouds peacefully drifting through the sky. If only a heavy sense, a dread, didn't cling around me, throat like a noose. I rounded the corner of one of the buildings, with Libby close behind. Before me stretched a courtyard. A few trees stretched tall, casting long shadows. The trees were surrounded by a few dry patches of grass and shrubs. I had to shift my head a bit to the right, but I saw him standing there, maybe 50 feet away. His name was on the tip of my tongue. It was nearly out of my mouth in a whisper before something slammed my jaw shut. The way he stood gave me pause. His neck seemed to hang from his shoulders. The way he stood, his arms dangling empty at his sides, unmoving. I began to reach out to stop Libby, but before I could, she slammed into me. The knife she gripped in her hand clanged loudly through the still air into the shotgun strapped to my back. The breath in my lungs left me like someone had just punched me in the stomach. I looked to where Paul stood, horror clogged in my throat, as his head whipped towards us. What had happened next came in a blur. Minutes passed in seconds, my body numb as my instinct took control of my muscles. I grabbed Libby's arm and began to sprint as fast as I could. We ran across a street, hearing Paul's footfalls quickly gaining on us. I refused to turn around. I didn't trust blindly running into one of dark doorways that could hold any number of threats. Instead, my eyes scanned for anything we could climb. Relief spread over me as I spotted a ladder that hung from one of the buildings. I urged Libby ahead of me, letting her climb the ladder first as I turned, planting my feet. I raised the rifle, cocking it back before aiming it at Paul's head. I fired before my fear could choke me. His nearness unsettled me. He dropped hard to the ground, unmoving and lifeless. his body skidding against the pavement, twisting unnaturally as it landed. I turned, climbing the ladder, after Libby. My mind played over what I saw before the bullet ripped through Paul. In a flash, I saw blood that coated Paul's throat, but not from a bite. It looked more like a slash from a blade. I tried to focus on the placement of my hands on the rungs of the ladder, but my mind buzzed. Finally reaching the top, I froze, overlooking onto the roof, where Libby stood motionless. Before her stood a man. His hands reached out before him, as if he were trying to calm a spooked animal. Without thought, I pointed the rifle directly at him. Below me, I was faintly aware of the infected down below, gathering at the base of the ladder. Their frenzies, gargled sounds, reaching my ears. However, all my focus was on the man on the roof. His attention turned to me, and in that instance, shock radiated through me. I knew this man. I recognized his dark brown eyes from another lifetime ago, when his eyes didn't hold circles, bags, and his skin seemed to hang from his bones. He had worked in my department. For years we had walked the same halls and attended the same meetings. His name formed on my mouth without though, as I slowly lowered the rifle. Jesse? His eyes widened at the sound of his name. He lowered his arms. He looked different, almost unrecognizable, as he stared back at me. Libby and I joined him on the roof. Libby silently sat, staring blankly ahead towards the slow-moving clouds. I, however, stood with Jesse, staring over towards the small town that was now crawling with infected, their screams and snarls echoing through the streets below. Bad call, firing the rifle, Jesse said. His word came out a harsh whisper. His tone disturbed me. No person was the same after the outbreak, but something about Jesse seemed off. Hysteria seemed to have set into his once warm eyes. His jerky movements made me feel as if he was close to the edge of insanity. This man was not the one I had known in my life prior. I wanted to take Libby and leave as soon as I could, but the streets below were unsafe. I tried to calm my nerves and talk soothingly to the man, giving no indications to my fear other than the bullet already loaded into the chamber. I know I regret it now, but I just wanted to give us enough time to reach the ladder. His hand twitched at his side. Well, look what you did. He angrily pointed at the street below. When he moved his arm, my gaze drifted to his hip, where a gun poked from waistband. I had noticed it before, however. Now I could see it now in detail. I inhaled a sharp breath as realization soaked in. I grabbed the shotgun, slowly bringing it around to my front. The motion caused his head to snap in my direction. "Where did you get that gun?" I asked, my voice coming out shaky. Anger twisted his face as he grabbed it the same second I took aim with the rifle. Libby stood swiftly at the quick change of our position. The gun he held was my gun, the one that I had given to Paul the night prior. "I found it," Jesse said, his voice coming out in a snarl. The image of Paul running towards me replayed in my mind. His throat slit. "You killed Paul," I said, bothered by how my voice quivered. Jesse shook his head hard, as if he were trying to shake a thought out of his head. His arm twitched again. Nausea rolled up my throat, terrified of this crazed man before me. His face kept twitching, and he jerked again, using his free hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead. I have seen my share of evil men in this world, but something about Jesse was different. That is when I saw it. A trickle of blood running down his forearm, poking out from his sleeve, was just the outline of a bite mark. "You're infected, aren't you, Jesse?" Anger contorted his face again as I said his name. He was on the edge of turning. I could see that now. His twitch movement, his sunken eyes, his pale, sweat-soaked skin. All signs that a person was infected. I placed my hand on the trigger, ready to pull it, well aware that if I fired then he would too. We would most likely both go down, and Libby would be alone. However, at least she would be alive. "Don't do this. Please." My voice came out hoarse, pleading. Just then, something shifted in his eye. Clarity. For just a brief moment, the old, kind Jesse I knew was there. "I'm sorry." He looked scared. Then he pulled the gun back, aiming it at his own head, and fired. The force knocked him sideways, and I watched as his body tumbled over the side of the roof. Libby let out a shriek as I stood in silent horror. My hand clamped over my mouth. I ran to the edge, peering over at his disfigured body as it lay 3 stories down. It took only seconds for the horde to surround him and began ripping into his flesh. I stepped back, nearly tripping on thin air. I seen some dark things. I was no stranger to tragedy. However, it was something I could never get used to. The sound of his croaking apology replayed in my mind. Sorry for what? For killing Paul? For not making his bite known sooner? I wondered if he had even known what he had even done to Paul. I know the infection took hold before the person was completely lost, stealing bit by bit until there was nothing left. I knew I would see Jesse again. He would eventually join me in my nightmares, like all the others. Him and Paul would haunt me until I met my own fate one day.